Welcome to Healing Podcast, with this being season number 4, episode number 21. I'm your host, Robin Stoltman, and today I have my guest, Jennifer Peavey, author of Natural Reflectors, on the show talking about personal process development. And before we get started, remember every week I feature different guests to help you become the best version of yourself through different methods you may not have heard of or thought of. So let's get. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Robin. I'm really excited to be here as well. I'm sure the discussion is going to be lively.
I'm sure it will be, especially because I was thinking about like the 9 months of winter and 9 months to take a baby.
Yeah.
So what is your specialty and who do you like to work with, or like who is your book meant for?
Sure. My specialty, I guess, is I put together non-obvious connections. I have a varied background in engineering and innovation management and design. And so I've got all of these little tidbits of information that kind of float in there. And my superpower is being able to see how this over here goes with that over there. And I really didn't know it was something until I read Tom Kelly's book, The 10 Faces of Innovation. And he talks about cross-pollinating, kind of like a bee going from a flower to a flower. And that's kind of what I do. I tend to see things and put things together a little bit differently. Now, what I like to do for people, though, is I like to sit and talk with them about what's going on in their lives and helping them see that there are other answers and other solutions and other possibilities in what they're trying to do. They may not necessarily like exactly what I say, but it certainly breaks down some walls so that they can suddenly see what's on the other side of it and make some better decisions for themselves.
I like that.
Thanks.
You by chance used the artwork in the background or no?
I did. That was part of my pandemic, was actually putting all of this together. It's string art. In fact, I can grab a piece.
That's awesome.
Let's see, get it to the camera. And so it's nails and then thread. And so a lot of what I was doing was making all of these pieces to try to figure out how I could make them efficiently. Because I also wanted to have fun with it, but I also didn't want to get bogged down and, how was I going to make this black? How was I going to make the nails black? That type of thing. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because they're very intricate.
Thanks.
I like it.
Thank you.
So do you use that as part of your book or no?
It is not part of my book. I was actually doing it while I was writing the book. But it is interesting how there are some similarities to it. There were a lot of times that the book actually is about developing my own personal process. And I did run how to make these through my process before I was writing a book. And so it was about how to break down things into smaller bites. And I would use a certain set of days and allow myself to go through a cycle. So I would try things like I would say, okay, I want to have the nails be black and match, or the nails match the background. That way you wouldn't see them. And in this case, it's black. So I might spend a month going, okay, how long does it take to paint? How long does it take for them to dry before I could use them? And or that was way too long. And so then I was looking at, okay, how do I get black nails? Well, they were 3 times the cost. So I said, no, I don't want to do that.
No.
So I started researching and found out that I could heat treat them in my oven. It wasn't something that I needed blow torches. I could do it at like 350, 400, 500 degrees, maybe even 600 degrees, like if I was putting it through the cleaning cycle. And they would turn black, or at least a really, really dark brown, or a really, really dark blue. And that was fine with me, but it was really nice to go through these iterations. Okay, how was I going to do this? Okay. And then I decide, did I like it? Did I not? Kind of give an analysis for it. But so in a way, it was something that encouraged me to say that this personal process development was something worth doing.
That is awesome. I really like that.
Thanks.
I wouldn't have been that creative, especially like for the oven. I'm like thinking, typically I just put food in the oven.
I'm really bad about putting other things in the oven. I'm like, that's a heat source. We're going to use it.
That is true. I put polymer clay in there, but like when I've had like the polymer clay in there, I had to get an oven because I couldn't take the smell stays in the oven.
Yes. And I'm sure a lot of people go, you did what to your oven? Yeah. Keep your food separate is probably the best thing to do. Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree.
So, just for our listeners that are just tuning in, what's the best way for them to contact you with a time zone?
So I am in the Eastern time zone of the United States. And so the best way to get a hold of me would be through my website, jenniferpeavey.com, or you're more than happy to look out on my social media. I am at jennifer.theblacklab on Instagram and on Facebook. If you'd like to direct message me, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. So, who or what inspired you to do the work that you do?
So it's been accumulation over a lot of time. And I knew I had these particular superpowers. But what really brings me to you today is the fact that I went into the pandemic unemployed. And that was not exactly the time period to be unemployed.
No.
But I was also there was a certain intentionality to it. I just did not expect to have to battle the pandemic. I had left a corporate job, burned out, and I was trying to figure out what my options were moving forward. There's the fact I could have gone back to corporate, but I was really taking a moment to say, what do I really want to do? And the pandemic gave me the space and the excuse and the time to spend on that. So because of my varied background with engineering and innovation management and design, each one of those has a different specialty and a different process and a different language. And when you put yourself out there in the market, you're expected to be one of those three. But the difference is I am all three. And I really didn't want to only put one of those facets of me out there. I wanted to say all of it. Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot of time in the pandemic, not only trying to figure out what I wanted to do, but trying to figure out who I was, if I was trying to offer all these three things. And I created some structure in my life that allowed me to spend times of reflection and times of action. And I was reflecting on what I wanted to act on. And did that in a cycle. I would try some things out and I would come back and reflect on what I had done. I would reflect on what I wanted to do next. I would do it and I'd come back and assess and was trying to figure that all out. What I found after 2 or 3 of those cycles is I actually found a sense of control. I felt some peace and joy in the middle of this pandemic. Now, I wouldn't say it was all the time, but at least I felt like I was moving in a good direction. So I started sharing this, basically a workbook, with some other people, saying, basically friends that I knew were very stressed out. And I said, what do you think? And I came across a friend who had just finished writing her first book with the Creator Institute out of Georgetown University. And she introduced me to them. I showed him the workbook and I said, really, you should be doing a book first and then go to the workbook. So how I got here was I lived a journey of how was I going to pull myself out of burnout? And then what was I going to do moving forward? And I felt like that was something that was worth sharing, at least for a time period, and see what the response was.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful because, yeah, there's a lot of people that have experienced the burnout. And I think that's where the pandemic was helpful for a lot of people to see that they miss out on a lot of things. Like when you're working an 8 to 12-hour job, you miss out on your kids, you miss out on your family activities. And yeah, there's so much. I mean, the last job I had, they wanted me to come back just because there was nobody else to work for them. And I had a funeral, but I had to come back to work the next day. And I'm like, you're supposed to have three days of the family leave. And it's like, I didn't even get that. So no, that makes sense. Like why people are getting so burned out.
Yeah.
They're not being appreciated or respected for the work that they're doing.
Yeah. The World Health Organization calls it the health epidemic of the 21st century, that it is so pervasive and happening to so many people.
So then what is the reflection that you use to prevent burnout?
So but before I get into that, let's just take a second and define burnout.
Okay.
How is that different than stress? So burnout, by a classical definition, is unmanaged stress. You get to the point that you're exhausted, you have lower productivity, you put a mental distance between yourself and whatever it is that's causing the burnout. And that's what the World Health Organization calls burnout. I like to add a fourth thing to it. Mm-hmm. One of the problems is while you're in it, you really don't trust that there's anything you can do to get out of it. Like if it was your job, you feel like, doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to make a difference. There's a lack of trust. Maybe you don't trust yourself. You don't trust the system that you're in. It becomes one of those things. Now, what I feel like reflection does is allows you to back out and see a larger picture. It allows you to have time where you can actually hear your gut to better understand how you feel about the choices that are before you. And if you know what you feel, if you know that you like the options that are in front of you, then you're very likely going to make a better decision. You're going to feel more successful. You're going to feel like you have a little more control. You had a little more say-so within it. But I think what reflection, if we get back to what does reflection do to prevent burnout, I like to give a metaphor. And I live, of course, we said in the Eastern time zone, and here our mountains are the Appalachian Mountains, and there's a lot of switchbacks. It's a very old set of mountains. So you tend to, on your driving back and forth, when you're driving along in a car, particularly when the road is going to be changing a lot, you pay attention to that. You pay attention to how the road is turning. You might look at the mountain that's up on one side. You might have a cliff going off on the backside. You check who's behind you. You look in the rearview mirror. You might suddenly see a sign that says you're about to get in a set of switchbacks, and you say, I need to pay attention. Wake up. I need to pay attention. You might even check in with yourself and say, I'm a little drowsy. I might need to stop and get a cup of coffee. There are all of these little things that you do to nudge yourself to keep you in the lane, that you don't fall off the cliff, you don't go running into other traffic, you don't hit the car in front of you. And I think that's what reflection does. They're just small little nudges that say, I'm going to stay on the road. And that's how we prevent burnout, because burnout could be that you go off the road, you're on the side of the road, or heaven forbid, you're down the cliff. If that is the situation, what reflection can do is help you determine, where are you? And what do you want to do, or what are you willing to do to get back on the road? Do you need to make a phone call? Do you need to call emergency personnel? Do you just need to take a nap? That type of thing. So I feel like that's what reflection does, is it keeps you in your lane.
I like that version of it, because I've never heard of that before. Like, for the reflection, I'm just like thinking of like how I think of reflection is just thinking about what it is that I'd rather have in life than what I currently have. Right. I don't know if like most people think of that, if at all.
It could be. I mean, whether you're dreaming or wishing or, processing. I spend a lot of time processing in reflection. Like, well, why do I feel that way? I might even have a little conversation with myself, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you for saying that, because I'm not the only person that has conversations.
No.
I'm like, some of my conversations, especially after becoming a hypnotherapist, I'm like, some of my questions, I'm like, I'm my own therapist now. I'm like, do you do this and this and this? And okay, what's like, yeah.
There is an awful lot we can
do my own method of reflection, just in a different way, because there's certain things I'm like, if you stop and ask yourself like what your deathbed regret is, we all know it. We just don't really take time to reflect on what that is and how to change your life differently.
Yep.
So then, okay, so that's like 3 different methods of reflection that we've talked about.
You're good.
Are there any other methods that you know of to like help get that internal reflection?
Well, I'm sure there are thousands upon thousands. I can talk about what I do.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. One of the first things that I think is a mindset. Like if you want to cultivate a garden or cultivate peace, I think you cultivate reflection the same way. It requires deciding that you're going to get something out of it and creating space and time for it. And that's regular space and time, just like you would make sure that you water a plant regularly, but not too much, not too little, that type of thing. And once you set some sort of place or space for that, when you're in that space, what I have found is there are many times that you need to be able to say something. It might be, okay, here's this deathbed regret. It might be you need to say, I really wish we would have done that. Or I really wish that relationship were better. Just saying what needs to be said. There's also hearing what needs to be heard. It might be that you made a whole lot of effort on making that happen. It didn't go through, but you showed up and you tried. So while it might be a regret that you didn't get 100% success, it wasn't like you did nothing. So you may need to give yourself some encouragement or give yourself a break. Yeah, you wished you were a millionaire, but it wasn't like you sat on your butt and did nothing your entire life. You tried really hard and you are half a millionaire, and that's still something worth celebrating just because you didn't reach the million. Now, a lot of people, the way they do the space and the way they do the time, sometimes people need retreats. They need to get away from wherever they are. But, with the pandemic, that can be rather difficult. So at home, there may be ways to get away with white noise. I know people love the shower because, you can't hear a lot of things that are out there. I know a lot of people that have wonderful moments on a lawnmower, because they're isolated and they really can't hear what's going on. My particular way is journaling. I like to have a quiet time, but it's just me. And so it's very easy to do that. It's not like I have 4 or 5 children running around or a husband needing things. So that's easier for me to do that. While I journal, I have a number of prompts, mostly because I have a practice first thing in the morning, and I am not a morning person, which is a nice thing of having the practice in the morning. It allows me to gradually wake up. But that also means I'm not getting up going, okay, let's go. So it's nice for me to have a rhythm and prompts. And what I prompt with is, first thing I want to know is, what is my energy level? And I actually assign a number to it. And I do a 100-point scale. 0 is you might as well be in the grave, and 100 means you are flying to the moon. So where is my energy level in that? Today, mine was 70. So, and what I like to do is be able to say, okay, what was my energy level yesterday? Or is there a trend? Because I really want to know when there's a drastic change. My energy level was 90 yesterday. So why did it suddenly change? Well, yesterday I was at a conference with 300 people and I was speaking, and I was excited to get up there and be speaking about it. But that takes a whole lot of energy. And when I got home last night, I fell asleep. I sat down on the couch to rest for a second, drink a cup of tea, and I woke up later with a cold cup of tea, which kind of messed up my sleep pattern that night. And then also I had to go somewhere and sleep in a hotel on a different bed. So I can assign the reason that I dropped 20 points. It might have been there was another reason that it goes up. But whatever it is, I like to know, because I can either fix it or I can have more of it. If my energy level jumped up a lot, I want to know why and try to have more of that. Another prompt is I like to list what I'm grateful for, because that's a good mental practice, and it helps me assess where I am. I also like to spend a moment on what I am scared of or what I'm uncomfortable about. And I ask that to myself, but I don't necessarily write it down in the journal. What I do is I talk about to myself, my little conversation. Why am I not feeling good about that? What is it about it that's bothering me? And then I will flip the statement around to something positive. And so it may have been, I was nervous about the presentation, and I will tell myself, you are going to do a fabulous job. You are ready. You know this. You love doing it. So, I'll flip that around. And then the last thing I do is, it's called desire. And what that is about is, what do I need today to nourish me? And it might be something that I need to eat. It might be like tonight is going to be, I need to go to bed earlier because I need better sleep. It might be that I need more laughter. There are many times that I have found that I watch, like I was watching Designated Survivor on Netflix, and that was way too serious, particularly when you binge watch. And so I'll find, oh no, I need laughter in my life. So whatever it is that I need today, and I find for me, it's very serious that I give it to myself, because that's building self-trust. That if my inner voice says, I want this, then I make sure that I get that to them. Or at least if it's something, and maybe not impossible, but something a little difficult, I'll talk to myself and I'll say, is it okay if we did it this way or that way? And generally that just acknowledging it is very helpful. So that is what I do, but I can understand that everyone's unique and has different ways that work for them. Most of these prompts I got from books or YouTube videos. So there's often a really good way of finding guidance out there. You don't have to figure this all out on your own. You might want to tailor it later once you find what you like and what you don't like, but it's a whole lot easier when you got somebody helping.
Yeah, I would agree. especially like when you're just starting out.
Yeah,
And thinking
absolutely.
about what it is that you want to write or for the different prompts out there.
Hmm.
So, how does nature help to reflect?
So what I did was I was looking at how reflection and action were combined. And I found nature a really great source of inspiration on how that works out. Again, it's like the mindset of reflection. You almost have to shift your mindset and decide, hey, nature does have something to tell me. What I found were things, what I was looking for were cycles because I was prototyping and trying so many new things. So, two different ways that I looked at nature was I looked at the moon phases and I was using them as a timepiece, saying that when the moon was darker, so a new moon, I was going to spend more time reflecting. And when there was more light, I was going to have more action. And what that gave me was a set amount of time that I was going to be engaged in a particular activity. So when there was a lot of action, I would have 3, maybe 4 days to prototype something. Now, the engineer in me could go on forever with all the little details and get lost in all sorts of, oh, and we can do this, or we could add that. And the nice thing about having the timepiece was it said only this long, Jennifer. And so then I had to think a lot more about being efficient, just like with the string art. I could have tried all the different ways to do the nails. Well, you only have 3 days. So we're only going to try these 2 methods this time and we'll see how it goes. It allowed me to pull smaller bites and be more successful that way because of the way it was going. Now, another way that I look at it right now are the seasons. Very similarly with light, but it's also got temperature with it. So in the winter and the cold, or at least for us, if I'm looking at 3 months of winter as opposed to 9 months of winter,
Yeah.
I could say, okay, this is a time period where I would reflect more, I would dream more, I would hibernate more. You know, if we look at how an apple tree produces, it's going into complete dormancy. But the interesting thing is if it does not get below 40 degrees for 40 days, there is a particular hormone that the apple tree has that will not break down. And if that hormone is still present, then the tree will not blossom in the spring. So without the winter and without the cold, we cannot have apples. And so I think it's really important for us to realize that there are things that we need to let go of to be able to go back to the spring and produce again. And so with the spring, of course, things are warming up. This is when I like to be able to set my resolutions. I don't do it in January because I don't want to do it in January. It's cold, it's nasty. I want to hibernate. But in the spring, in March, late March, at least where I am in late March, this is the time period. Oh, we're going to get to go outside again every day. And you really want to do those resolutions. And so the spring is a time period where I want to try a bunch of new things, just like new things growing, just like the apple tree actually blossoming and then the cross-pollinating. We're putting all these wonderful things together.
True.
So the summer then is hotter and it's accelerating the growth. Not all of the blossoms became fruit. So, but we're going to focus in on the ones that did, and we're going to spend a lot of energy on getting that apple to grow. And then, of course, because it's hot, we feel like we can move around a whole lot faster. Then with the fall, there's that time period where we're going to let things go. That we finally, okay, we've pulled away from this apple. It's going to be able to be harvested. We let go of the leaves. We slow down. In the case of a farmer, we can talk about the fact that this is the time period of profit. This is the time period of sharing what has come out of it. And then we go back again towards the winter where we go into complete dormancy and rest. And so these are ways that I feel like that we can look at when and maybe even how to reflect what we get from nature. I have another example if you want to get into that. I didn't know if you want to.
Oh, yeah, I do. Okay. Yeah.
So there was a woman I actually interviewed in my book that is an environmental artist. And there were 2 things I learned from her, that there are layers that you can discover within nature. And then there are also patterns within it. So she had been hired by the city of Philadelphia to put in an installation and anywhere within Philadelphia, but she chose the Schuylkill River. And she spent 2 years going down to the river and studying it. It turns out it's a tidal river, which is very rare. and it's rare to have it in a downtown area. And she ended up, after she was studying it and looking at how everything flowed, she put together 9 buoys. 3 were red, 3 were teal, and 3 were green. And she strung them all into one string, such that when it was at high tide, the buoys, the entire string would be standing up and all you could see were the red. And then as the tide would go out, the buoys would come down and then eventually get to the point that all 9 of them were on the surface of the river. And in that way, all those skyscrapers around downtown Philadelphia could look down at the river and see there's this thing happening that is beyond what's happening on their PDAs and in their meetings. And every day this tide was happening. Now it took her 2 years that she studied this. So those were all sorts of layers on how it all moved. But what was interesting, the fact that the buoys were on top of the surface, there were other patterns within it. So there was the flow of the water. There was when it rained and the levels changed, and all of these buoys and their strings would dance on the surface of the river in multiple different ways. And you know, that probably happens in those small little highlights that sometimes you get on a river. But the fact that these buoys might have been 6 inches around, so it was feet long, you could see enormous dancing patterns on the top of the river. And so for me, talking to her, it was not just going and observing. She spent 2 years standing and looking and watching. She may have even got on boats, but it wasn't until she interacted with it, with the buoys, that she learned something else about what was happening.
Wow.
Yeah. She was great to talk to.
Well, yeah, because you never really stop and about like all the little waves and like how things just move.
Yep.
Until you actually have it where it's a bigger picture of it.
Right. And so I think it's not only being able, you know, we can observe out the window, whether it's hot or cold or whatever's going on. Being able to go out in it is one thing and observe more, but to actually interact with nature can help us. So therefore, it's always this inspiration that can be there for us.
It's awesome. My thing is like, how does that work in winter? Because I'm just like, I'm not a winter type of person. I
completely understand. Well, we could say just like what we said about winter, just the fact that it is winter. What does that mean with the earth? You know, that means, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, that means we've laid all the way back. So it's kind of a nice thing. Maybe that's an attitude. We need to lay back in the winter. We need to slow down because that's what happens to all the trees that are outside. The nice thing is there's also the internet. And there's all sorts of ways that you can watch all sorts of documentaries about how things put together. There's and this is certainly one of those you can't see out there. You know, it's really nice to be able to have scientists out there that do this. But roots of trees or any type of root, plant or whatever, actually sends out chemical signals as it's growing. And what it's looking for in those signals, it's looking for calcium. And so therefore the roots know if there is calcium in a certain direction, they will continue growing in that direction. Now, if there's a rock or a piece of concrete, there's no calcium. So a root will actually turn its direction before it gets to the rock, which is very interesting. It senses it beforehand, which for us, I think is a great metaphor. There is no reason for us to hit brick walls. We should think about, okay, if I'm heading in that direction, if I'm dealing with somebody and I'm not getting what I need, why am I banging my head against that wall?
It doesn't make any sense. You just got to pivot and turn.
And pivot and turn.
People that did well in the pandemic, why they had their businesses succeed was because they had the ability to not let that affect them. They just kept on going.
Yep. It's a choice to be able to say, hey, or just acknowledge. And that I think is part of the reflection. You know, you're nudging to stay on the road and realize there is a big turn coming. I need to pay attention and make that turn, as opposed to saying, I'm just going to drive off that cliff. I don't care.
True.
You know?
Yeah, that is true. I was thinking about, like, if I would have known that about the one plant when I had a house in Minnesota, I would have took and just put concrete down. We took and there's like a sucker type tree. So
Uh-huh.
it just like, it was not a tree, but it was like a sucker type kind. So it just kept coming back. And we poured gasoline on it, lit it on fire, did a whole bunch
Yep,
of
yep.
things. It just kept coming back. I mean, like it was right next to the house. So we could set the whole thing on fire. But I mean, like it just kept coming back and we just gave up on it. If I would have known
Got
about
it.
concrete, I would have just done that. No wonder why it stayed in like the one area all the time. We couldn't figure out why it never spread it out. That makes sense now.
There you go. That's exciting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because now next time I'm not going to do that. Because yeah, we tried a bunch of different things, but I didn't know that about for the plants. That's why they do keep going around. Like they do different things. Because I was wondering that like with strawberries, because like strawberries, you always have to have, otherwise they'll take over the whole garden. You
Right.
have to have like a
Area.
fenced area around them
Yep.
because they'll seriously take up the whole thing. They don't know
Yep.
like when to stop.
Yep. Yep. Same thing with mint or basil. Yeah. A very invasive. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm like, I wish I would have known that ahead of time. I do a lot of gardening, so that's why and I love plants. I've got a green thumb,
Right.
but I've never understood like why is that?
Right.
And so I actually that would explain for like root bound why plants
Mhm.
get root bound.
Yep. Yep. They're still, yeah, because they just keep going as long as there's calcium.
Wow. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm so good at it. Because like every time I have so I have like I can have a mini rose bush.
Yeah.
And it gets like a massive one. I'm like, why is that? Like, why do I have that? It's supposed to stay tiny, but no, it turns out to be massive.
Mhm.
But now I'm like thinking about, well, because I don't let it get root bound.
Mhm.
I just keep having it get bigger pots.
Right.
So yeah, like everything you're saying, that totally makes sense.
It's growing. Yeah. If you're not confined. Yeah.
Yeah. But then we confine ourselves into,
Yeah.
like
So
everything you're
see, yeah. And where do you keep your rose bush? That little mini rose bush? Is it on your desk or inside?
Oh, I don't have it now, but I mean,
Okay.
like, when I did, that makes sense though.
Right. But I was just thinking you were talking about not going
I had
outside,
to put it outside. I ended
but
up having to put it outside
because it was so big. Yeah. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it was inside for a while. So there is the ability to have a certain amount of nature inside. The other thing that I have also done, and part of my growth journey in the book was also including the definition of nature as to how we are wired. Like what is it that is easy for me to do? Or like, do I work better in the morning? Do I work better in the evening? You know, there's certain personality and all of that, but including that as part of the definition of nature. And then what I found is if I was connecting my nature to that nature that's outside, that was really a superpower connection as well.
I'm going to keep that in mind. I work better in the afternoons. I'm like, mornings? No. When I was a kid, yes. But after having all my kids, I'm like, my kids get up extremely early. But
Right.
I'm like, no, my afternoons, that's when I'm at my most, I can get a lot done.
Sure.
More productive than any other time of the day.
That is great. And it's good to know.
But then to put that in with nature, how would you combine that?
Well, some of it, what you can do is think about, okay, so what else happens in the afternoon that's really important? Or what are things in the morning that are okay? So your nature is that you are slower in the morning. You're still productive. It's not like you're sleeping through the morning. You're still doing things. But what is it? It may be the way that you arrange the day, but are there things within nature that start more slowly? Like what happens pre-dawn?
Sunrise.
Yeah, what happens
before?
Yeah, what happens pre-dawn? You know, and you may even think about, okay, they always talk about that little bit of darkness or whatever it is just before it dawns, and say your afternoon is your dawn. You know, it doesn't have to be literal, but it might be interesting to shift what is a day like to what you are naturally like.
That's interesting. I'll have to think about it and play around with it because that's
Yeah, it might give you some ways to change, just slightly nudge a few things and make your life a little bit easier. It's the only reason I do this is because if nature has figured out how to do certain things for millennia, then, why would we not want to take a look at that?
Well, yeah, because it doesn't make any sense not to.
Right. At least try it, because everything I'm doing is a prototype. That's one reason I have these cycles. Try it. It's okay if it doesn't work out, but at least you tried it, and then you can adjust it however it goes.
I like that. I've really enjoyed this conversation. There's a lot of different reflection that I was doing at the same time. I'm just like, yeah, you're right on how this or that works.
Yeah.
For things. So, well, just one more time for our audience, what's the best way for them to contact you?
So my website, jenniferpeavey.com, and then social media is at jennifer.thebblacklab.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. I really enjoyed having you on as a guest for the Healing for the Soul podcast. And for all of our audience, and either if you're listening or you're watching, I really appreciate your time and your energy as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin. This has been wonderful.
Yep. Bye.
See ya.